and welcome to Bible Bits Ministries Life Questions, Bible Answers, Episode 2. Our question for today is the Bible historically reliable? You can answer that, honey.
Okay, yes. So the first thing that points to the Bible, I think is worth mentioning, is the prophetic evidence. So we're not going to read the whole of Daniel 2, but I encourage you to read Daniel 2 if you haven't before, and probably the rest of Daniel, but specifically Daniel 2, that gives the story or the prophecy, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and the golden statue. So we won't go into that, but if you read through that prophecy and check those dates and the times with history, then it's very clear, very good evidence of what happens to those nations over the next 1,000 years. So those things come with very great details, very reliable details, and they can all be checked, which points towards the fact that there are many prophecies in the Bible that are true and reliable. We've also got some messianic prophecies, things like Micah 5:1, where he prophesies where Jesus will be born. There's other prophecies about Jesus' name. Many others Jesus makes himself about things like the destruction of Jerusalem. These prophecies, have been shown in history to have come true. There are many as well that are given in the Old Testament, prophecies given in the Old Testament that have been fulfilled in the New Testament and written about in the New Testament. So that brings us on to the fact that is the New Testament reliable? So authenticity of a document, of an ancient document, is often given or decided by how original it is, or how long after the original has been written, and how accurate it is, the accuracy of the document that we found to writings that we've got now, that are obviously older copies, and how many surviving copies of the documents we've got to corroborate each of them. So we've got some examples, and if we look through other surviving documents that aren't biblical, of course, that we can take some examples. For example, we've got Homer. Homer. There's about 263 books of Homer. In fact, let's do that again. Okay. So where was I? So, for example, if we take surviving copies of other books that are not biblical, we know that there are 7 surviving copies of Plato, of the writings and works of Plato. There are 8 copies of Herodotus, and there are 263 copies of Homer, which sounds quite impressive. But when you think that they're all about contemporary with the Old Testament, certainly, and you think that there are more than 5,000 surviving copies of the New Testament, 5,000 surviving copies of the New Testament, it makes it the most reliable, most well-documented book that you can find in the history so far. Of course, everyone knows about the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were discovered February-March of 1947 by a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad. He was in fact looking for a lost goat, and he threw a stone into a cave, and here's a clay pot shattering. He goes and investigates and finds 981 scrolls through 11 different caves. There were leather scrolls, all wrapped up in cloth and very well sealed in these jars, which kept them for hundreds of years, thousands of years. They were, obviously put there before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD to try and preserve the writings of these people, and discovered, as I said, 1800 years later. So the oldest complete Hebrew manuscript from the Old Testament was taken from, or was written in the first decade of the 11th century BC, which is very old. It's just about 200 years after the Old Testament would have been completely written. So 200 years after an entire manuscript of the Hebrew Bible was discovered as written. So that's quite impressive. What else have we got? We got an ancient copy of Isaiah scroll found from the Dead Sea Scrolls, was compared to the Masoretic text of Isaiah, which is about 1,000 years younger, 1,000 years later, and it was almost identical. The text that was written and found in the Dead Sea Scrolls was word for word identical to the text that they had that was 1,000 years later. So again, it shows the reliability of the translations of the copying of these scrolls and how carefully copied they were. Going into the New Testament, the oldest piece of the New Testament that we've got in history are fragments of John 18, several pieces of these that were written in 130 AD. Again, just a few decades after John would have originally written them, so they would have only been copied a few times from the original, and they're the oldest surviving parts of the New Testament. So we can see that the manuscript evidence, the document evidence that we've got is very, very reliable, very, very convincing. Also, the last part is the archaeological evidence. So we've got prophetic evidence, we've got manuscript evidence, now archaeological evidence. There's lots of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll give you a couple of examples, a few examples. We've got the stela of the Babylonian king Hammurabi, which was discovered by French archaeologists around 1902, and it had I think 240 laws, old ancient laws written on them, many of which were the Mosaic laws. So, corroborated the books of Deuteronomy and Leviticus. The Moabite stone was uncovered by a German archaeologist, I believe. He went and was speaking to some Arabic sheikh, and the sheikh just by chance showed in the stone that he had, and on it was written Israel's relationship with Moab, mentioned in 2 Kings 3. So all those things that were mentioned in 2 Kings 3, many of which were written on this old stone that the sheikh had. Another one called the Pontius Pilate inscription was found in 1961 in Caesarea Maritima, which is where Pontius Pilate lived, or was recorded to have lived, and it's the first archaeological evidence that proved the existence of Pilate, which again, before that time, he was always considered to be a fictional character. We've got many more evidences, proof of Caiaphas, proof of David, Daniel, Goliath, around that area where the famous battle of David and Goliath happened, and those two armies. We've got several archaeological digs that have happened in those areas, corroborating very detailed facts that are written in the Bible. So there are many things. So while the Bible itself, we consider the Bible as being self-evaluating, self-authenticating, because we do consider it, as mentioned before in the previous episode, that it is the true word of God. In fact, if we read John 17:17, it says, "Sanctify them with your truth, your word is truth." So we believe that the Bible is self-authenticating. We believe, as Christians, of course, that everything written in the Bible is 100% accurate, 100% true, and historically accurate. But if you don't want to consider that as being evidence, then the prophetic evidence confirms the truth that the Bible is the inspired word of God. The manuscript evidence confirms the textual reliability of the Bible. The archaeological evidence confirms the historical reliability of the Bible. In short, non-biblical evidence is overwhelming. Yeah, so even the non-biblical evidence that we've had discovered in the last several hundred years has been absolutely overwhelming, much more overwhelming than evidence that can be produced for any other book in history, and most historical figures as well.
Do you think can we consider the Bible as a history book?
It's not all history, as we said. I think in the last episode, I said there were 22 historical books in the Bible, which are then history books. They are true historical recordings of the people of Israel in those days. But of course, there are other parts of the Bible that can't be considered as literal historical events. For example, the prophetic books, they can't be taken literally. The poetic books can't be taken literally. So, I mean, you have to read the Bible in its context. So what type of book is it? Who wrote it? Why were they writing it? You can't take everything literally, and this is possibly one of the problems that people try and do. Scholars or people that are trying to discredit the Bible sometimes take things out of context. They take, prophetic texts and then try and read them literally, which of course was never meant to be. So no, not every part of the Bible is historically true, but I do believe that all the historic books of the Bible are historically accurate. And again, it's not me that says that, and it's not Christians that have discovered these things. These are usually atheist or non-Christian non-religious archaeologists that have discovered these things. And most of it, supports what the Bible has said in some way.
All right. Thank you, honey.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have comments or additional answers to the question, please don't hesitate to make a comment below or send us a message. Bye for now.
Have fun.